Of course, the last days have been very much in the news as far as the election decree is concerned. And I emphasize the word decree because the discussions have not been so much about the election itself scheduled for February the 26th, but rather on how this election has come about. There has been correspondence between the Parliament and the government, between the government and the Dutch State Secretary, Mr. Knops. Suffice it therefore to say that it was a unanimous decision of the Parliament of St. Martin of the 10th of November to request the government of St. Martin to send the decree that was there at the time for the election, to send that decree via the Minister Plenipotentiary up for annulment. So it's important to note that that was a motion of the Parliament and a unanimous motion. Since then, a lot has transpired. As I mentioned, there has been communication between the Parliament asking questions of the government responding to those questions, and in addition, the government sending a request pertaining to that decree to the Dutch government. There is also a request for advice regarding the same matter at our local council of advice. So as far as I'm concerned, this matter is going to be put aside until we hear something or another. But now the focus should be on the election, of course, the election for the 26th or on the 26th of February. But also important is what happens between now, the election, and the date that a new parliament will take office. According to that decree for the election, which has dissolved the Parliament of St. Martin, the elections are for the 26th of February, and the new parliament will sit on the 2nd of April. However, government business needs to continue. Part of government business is that the parliament continues to exercise its right and asks accountability from government. That's the way our system works. I believe that Parliament should continue to focus on the recovery, on the reconstruction of St. Martin. This process is going to be a long process. Right now, we are in the middle of discussions regarding the funding that needs to come to St. Martin. The funding that has been agreed to between the Dutch government and the St. Martin government. Yes, a small portion of that funding started following the conclusion that the conditions as set forth have been met. So, when it was concluded by the Dutch government that the conditions of the Integrity Chamber and the Border Control Agreement were met, they gave the go-ahead signal for the funding to St. Martin to start. As I mentioned, it started with funding for projects that are managed by NGOs on St. Martin. Several of those are currently in process. And the bigger part of the funding, which includes two parts. One, the liquidity assistance, so in other words, the financial assistance to the government of St. Martin. And then you have the fund that is supposed to be managed in collaboration with the World Bank. That has been established. So with that being on the way, the Parliament now has to exercise its responsibility, which is keeping a finger on the pulse as to how those programs are going. And now the Dutch government has to constantly be looked at in terms of whether they are complying with their part of the bargain. In order to do that, however, St. Martin needs to make sure that we are doing all that we are supposed to do. An important part of what we are supposed to do as we go forward is setting up an organization on St. Martin that will be the counterpart for the World Bank organization. I have stated on more than one occasion that in addition to needing our professionals in and outside of government to be part of that organization on St. Martin, it should also be a learning process for our young professionals on St. Martin. This opportunity of working with an organization like the World Bank is not going to happen often. That's one thing. Secondly, the working with the World Bank that is going to be established now, that in itself is going to be a long process. And our people need to make sure that they are part of that process. So as we, as a parliament, look towards the coming months until a new parliament takes office, we need to continue to monitor what is happening in respect to the reconstruction program, the reconstruction activities here on St. Martin.